Welcome to Conscious Living Collective, a place where we explore ideas for a more conscious, more fulfilled, and more empowered living. My name is Tomek. I'm a scientist, a teacher here on Insight Timer, but most importantly, like yourself, a seeker, constantly evolving, constantly working on myself with myself. Welcome today to today's session. Very important topic, self-acceptance. Before we jump into it, I will give you a minute to settle in and welcome everyone who decided to join the session. In particularly, I welcome the first timers. So you are here for the first time, please raise your hand. And those of you who come on a regular basis, please help me in welcoming those first timers here. I really hope you will enjoy the session today. So I started the session with question: are you highly self-critical? And this is a very important question because it has everything to do with the topic of self-acceptance. As a matter of fact, before we even address self-acceptance, we have to recognize the quality or the characteristic that is on the other side of the spectrum, which is self-criticism. And even though self-acceptance is a quality that we must work on developing, we come embedded with self-critic, as I call him. So right at the start here, I want to tell you that yes, we are starting from a disadvantaged point of view, but not all hope is lost. And during this session, I want to show you that self-acceptance is not only possible, but is necessary if you wish to live happy, fulfilled life, which is essentially our encompassing topic for Conscious Living Collective and the entire group. So let me welcome all of you who are here. Jen and Joan, thank you for admitting. By the way, I raise my hand. I'm very self-critical, and one of the qualities that goes along with self-criticism is perfectionism. Maybe I'm going to mention a bit of that, talk more about it later. But for a perfectionist, that inner critic, it's particularly pronounced, if you will. Hello, Melissa. Hello, Sandy. And good to see you, Joan, Liz, Tosca. Thank you guys for joining the conversation. For those of you who are here for the first time, the way it works, the way Conscious Living Collective works, it's a conversation. If you have anything to comment on, questions to ask, you are always welcome. And I will try to accommodate those comments and questions. But right now, as I said, I want to start off this session by addressing the whole concept of self-critic, which again, it's a starting point for most of us because it's a built-in, so to speak, characteristic that our brain is burdened with. And there are a couple of factors that help us to recognize the inner critic at work. And first of all, it's the inner voice, that inner dialogue that we constantly having with ourselves that very often takes us towards that negativity. That's why it's a critic. It's a criticism towards what we do, how we think, how we feel. And the second quality of the self-critic, and please tell me at any given point of our Conscious Living Collective, please tell me if you feel this way, if what I'm talking about, do you resonate with it? Because this is an important part of Conscious Living Collective that we embarking upon this journey together. And I would love to hear your feedback on this. So inner voice, right? It's inner voice is the voice of the inner critic very often, pushing on us all those things, constantly evaluating and judging thoughts, actions, even achievements. And it goes without saying that it will highlight flaws, mistakes, shortcomings, and as a result, leave us with self-doubt and negative self-perception. The second characteristic of the self-critic, so we're starting on the other side of the spectrum, is the perfectionism, right? Again, I am the president of the Perfectionists Club, and I admit that it's very difficult. It's a quality that is very difficult to work with. Even right now, when I'm speaking to you, I want to make sure that the microphone is in the right position, the camera, the lights, that you can hear me loudly, that the content is well prepared. And although this sounds like an absolutely normal thing, for me, very often it takes a lot of energy that otherwise I could spend by simply being with you and being present with you. And so far, the best sessions I had on Insight Timer are those when I felt, when I left the perfectionism behind and I simply focused on your presence here and being with you. So having said that, let me try and be less perfect today and put that characteristic aside. But perfectionism, obviously, it's a tendency to set excessively high standards. It's not about doing things, saying whatever. No, it's about setting excessively high standards for oneself and engage in relentless self-evaluation. Does it ring a bell? It certainly does ring a bell to me. Noah says this all resonates all in caps. Elizabeth, I think we are programmed to be self-critical when we are very young, particularly in certain religious circles and definitely in schools, sports, etc. That is very true, Elizabeth. And most importantly, even though we are self-critical, being taught to be self-critical, nobody challenges that self-criticism later in life, and that can be detrimental. So thank you for that comment. Tosca says, this is definitely describing me, Sue. So recognizing the very strict inner critic, and also I have always been a perfectionist, also feeling guilty when I haven't been able to do things perfectly. Thank you, Sue. You just basically described the way I act and how I behave. So I'm not on my own here. Thank you. Misery needs company. Oh, sorry, perfectionism needs company in this instance. So thank you for commenting on that. So perfectionism, so inner voice, perfectionism, we're talking again about self-critic, and then we are going to put it as opposed to self-acceptance, which again, it's a quality that we need to develop. It can come from our upbringing, particularly if we had supporting parents teaching us about self-worth and so on and so forth. But from what I'm gathering, vast majority of us have highly developed self-critic as opposed to self-acceptance. So there's a saying that comparison is killer of joy. And comparison is also another voice of the inner critic. The habit of comparing oneself to others leads to self-critical thoughts, feelings, and feelings of inadequacy. So being inadequate, this is something that inner critic wants us to do. It's not enough. One of the favorite affirmations for me, I am loved, I'm worthy, I am enough. This is something that is perhaps the biggest curse for the inner critic, right? Our inner critic wants the exact opposite to that affirmation. And then, the comparison is something that self-comparison, it's so exaggerated and exacerbated in our society. We constantly compare ourselves to others, whether it's a social status, whether it's a good looks, whether it's weight, whether it's this, such and such. There are a million things that the inner critic will want us to compare ourselves to others. And it's not only counterproductive, it also leads to shame and doubt. And as a result, decreases our well-being tremendously. And unfortunately, this is again something that it's been so widely accepted in our society. For many of us, this is a norm. Being, constantly comparing yourself to others. In the era of social media, everything that we see has to be perfect. We apply filters and angles, and we want to see ourselves in that perfect light. The truth is, nothing in this world is perfect if in the light, in the view of the inner critic. And if we don't break the cycle of the inner critic, our brain will always put us in that disadvantageous position. And one of the interesting ones when it comes to self-critic is to fear of failure. Even though failure is such a fundamental aspect of our life, inner critic will always put us in a position where we question ourselves before doing absolutely anything. And I cannot name a number of times when I talked myself from doing something very important and very beneficial to me just by speaking to the inner critic. Because inner critic told me, no, you will fail. And what is wrong with failing? Failing is actually the only way to learn. Failure is the feedback that we receive from the environment, from others, even from ourselves, to tell us, well, this is it's about the journey. It's not about the destination. We're constantly working. We're constantly growing. As a matter of fact, for those of you who think that you are just that you basically want to stay the way you are, I have a bad news. You won't be happy. You won't be satisfied, because we are here in this reality system to grow, to improve, and to learn. And those of us who embrace failure, which, by the way, is one of the ways to practice self-acceptance, will be much better off and will have much better success in going through life. Robin says, I don't suffer from the perfection infection. I really like that, perfection infection, but often criticize myself for bad decisions. So again, this is the ability of our brain to retrospectively take something on board and analyze it, unfortunately, in a negative light. Because there's nothing wrong with looking at our past failures and learn from them. But the self-criticism is not constructive. Self-criticism is distractive, right? It can leave us actually in doubt for taking future decisions. Anne says we compare the outside image of others with our inner experience. We don't know what the inner experience is like. I love that, Anne. Thank you so much. This is so very true. We compare the outside image of others with our inner experience. We don't know what the inner experience is like. Yeah, this is kind of how brain works. That it works based on comparison. From the very early age, we are taught that it's black and white, hot and cold. And our cognitive power is designed in a sense, or it's taught this way. And this is a voice, again, of the inner critic. So thank you, Anne, for bringing that up. But after we finally acknowledge and set a starting point, again, recognize the inner voice, that for some of us, the perfectionism, recognize that we habitually compare ourselves to others. Some of us possess negative self-image, and we are afraid. We are in constant fear. That's the starting point from which the growth begins. Because one of the most qualities and then factors where self-acceptance starts is self-awareness. So the reason why I mention all those aspects of the self-critic is to bring awareness and shed a light on what we are against. We are standing right here. And they say that asking the right question and recognizing the problem is a 90% contributes. It's a biggest contributor to your success. If you define clearly what we are against, it is so much easier to start your journey of self-acceptance, where we start looking with clarity of what is happening right here and right now in our lives. This is the Eckhart Tolle's power of now. It's not what we did, it's not what we will do, but what we are right now, the state of our being. And there, as a scientist, I can tell you, the more information, the more knowledge you have about yourself and the environment around you, the better decisions you will make. You are equipped to start developing self-compassion. And that starts with self-awareness. Self-awareness as in recognizing and understanding your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors without judgment. Because judgment is the voice of the inner critic. So developing an awareness of who we are and how we experience the world, facilitating self-acceptance as a unique individual. Self-awareness. I have quite a few meditations on Insight Timer that talk about this topic. Talk about the topic of self-awareness and the role of self-awareness in recognizing the inner critic. If we do not recognize the inner critic in the action, thoughts, emotions that we experience, it will be very difficult to stand and accept ourselves who we are, because the voice, it's unfortunately against us very often. So by recognizing it, we can move forward. And from self-awareness, from being aware of all those characteristics that we are against, we can stand for a moment and apply self-compassion. And self-compassion is second, the most important. From awareness, we move to kind of the active. We move to action. Awareness is, I'm not sure if you can say it's passive, but definitely self-compassion. It's an active. It's taking action. After we recognize something, we take a stance and work with self-acceptance. Self-compassion is the fundament where we start. So treating yourself with kindness, understanding, and forgiveness, especially during challenging times when we face personal shortcomings. Recognize when the self-critic is the most active. Is when everything is okay, when the things are a bit go south. So inner critic will kick us down when we lie down, so to speak. When we feel the most vulnerable, that's where the self-critic is the most pronounced. And that's on the contrary, when we recognize that it's importance of that self-compassion. Not when the things are great, but actually when during the shortcomings. And again, it's not simply patting yourself on the shoulders like it doesn't matter what I do. No, that's not what self-compassion is about. Self-compassion is recognizing the human condition. And by human condition, it is that we learn through failures. And those failures are absolutely fundamental if you want to move forward and grow. And actually, during those failures, during those shortcomings, we learn about self-acceptance. And the tool of self-acceptance is, or the way, the road, the path to self-acceptance is through self-compassion. So what can help me is this helpful thought. Instead of trying to prevent that there will be ripples in the ocean, we can learn to trust ourselves to deal with those ripples in a healthy way. Absolutely. That's what That's what we discuss today. Self-acceptance can be defined as a positive way of dealing with the ripples on the ocean. Ocean being the metaphor for life, and how we immerse ourselves in life. There are always ripples, if you think about it, on the surface of the ocean. But again, we can learn through self-acceptance how to deal with them in a positive way, in a way that we grow as a part. We feel ashamed for what we did. Thank you, Sue, for bringing that up. So we start with self-awareness, then we look at ourselves with kindness and understanding and forgiveness, which is the definition of self-compassion. And then through that, we slowly start cultivating positive self-image. And positive self-image is not just relates to your physical appearance, but also relates to personality traits and our abilities. Right? Although based on what we see around us, the physical appearance is number one thing. I put my money on personality traits. Right? Working with positive self-image is to recognize what are your talents and what are your shortcomings. And we are trying to turn those shortcomings into talents. We try to recognize where we are failing and using this as a springboard to grow and to turn it into talents. Because one of the things, it's a kind of counterintuitive thing, but one of the ways of the universe, and by the way, of the universe, it's usually ourselves, or universe and us, to move us forward is to highlight those failures and shortcomings, right? Through our, how we think about ourselves, because before you even move to other people, and before even other people start pointing towards our shortcomings and our image, right? We're looking at ourselves. Again, we come back to the self-critic. Self-critic is the tool that points out towards this and that. And we have to, through self-awareness, we have to recognize, is it something that we may actually work on that help us to grow? Or is it something that it's just simply a recurring thought and we should just focus on our talents? So, positive self-image, recognizing and appreciating our strengths, talents, and achievements, rather than focusing on perceiving flaws or comparing yourself to others. So working on the self-image, it's a very important aspect of self-acceptance. As a matter of fact, I'm constantly working on improving my self-image, not in the eyes of others, not by posting pretty photos on social media, but by looking in the mirror. And like in Michael Jackson's song, I start with the guy in the mirror. I look in the mirror and say what there is in me that requires a bit of work. What are the talents that I have? What are my strengths? And usually working with your strengths brings you a lot of joy, a lot of satisfaction. And that obviously helps a lot by fully accepting yourself. There's very few people that can constantly bashing themselves and say, oh yeah, I'm great. After the session of bashing yourself again, after a round with the self-critic, it's very difficult to finish on the note, oh yeah, great, I love myself. However, if you have a round with your strength, you're good at something and you do something and you appreciate the path, right, and the journey. That's a great confidence builder, right? That's a great move or positive move towards the self-acceptance. John says it's very hard to do. I agree. Again, the only thing that is easy to do, which I described, is to listen to the inner voice of self-critic. That comes by default. Everything else that I describe, what's self-awareness, self-compassion, working on the positive self-image, these things are very difficult to do. So again, take it slowly. Start with recognition. Start with easy traits. And then build on it and see where that's going to take you. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons behind the sessions here of Conscious Living Collective is to offer you support and to say simply that you are not alone. That we are, in a sense, all on the same wagon. Again, small imperfections. English is not my first language, and I have to accept that on many occasions I cannot fully express myself. But I embrace that, and hopefully bring some humor to your life. Because many people complimented me on my foreign accent. So I learned to love my foreign accent. And this is one of the things. You can turn a potential flaw into something positive. Noah says 100% human, complete package. So I agree with you guys. That's why we are here, to support each other on this path, to recognize you are not alone, and that makes things easier. Recognizing that, that's why I ask you at the beginning of this session, how many of you how many of you feel overly self-critical? And I was the first one to raise my hand. And simply by recognizing I'm not on my own, I'm not the struggle that I experience, I share with others. This makes things much easier. So another factor of self-acceptance is authenticity. Being true to yourself and living in alignment with your values, beliefs, and passions. Once again, we're coming to the positive self-image. You try to capitalize on your strengths and talents, right? And through that, you're being authentic. I'm sure there are many around you in society in general that will want you to act, behave in a certain way. But it's always very important to ask yourself, is it in line with my beliefs, with my core values, and with my passions? Because if it's not, it is very likely that you will fail more often than not. And then the self-critic comes and will kick you again when you're down, and then shame, self-doubt. We all know this path. So being authentic is important in practicing self-acceptance, because if we are not authentic, we cannot accept something that is not part of us. We have to be honest with ourselves. Not an easy thing to do. So part of being authentic is embracing your unique qualities, your quirks and individuality without conforming to societal expectations or opinions of others. Promoting congruence and inner peace. Society, others, how do you define yourself? Can you stand in front of the mirror as a whole person without needing approval of others? Or do you need constant affirmation and recognition from the society and from your friends? That's not being authentic. That's simply succumbing to something that's built in us that usually takes us in the other direction. So there are many other factors of self-acceptance, but the last one I want to the last one I want to mention is the growth mindset. We talk about growth mindset when we spoke about in the previous topics on I don't remember, there were quite a few times, because when you think about it, for those of you who attended previous sessions, you see that the theme is we taking a look at ourselves from different angles. And we're trying to deconstruct some of those things before we put ourselves back together. So the process of deconstructing itself is looking at yourself in a critical way, as in constructive way, not in a way that says, okay, you are such and such, and there's nothing you can do about it. We're looking at ourselves like, oh yeah, this is actually something I can improve on, or this is something I can eliminate to improve our well-being. And we kind of constantly taking ourselves apart and put ourselves back together with self-compassion, with a grain of self-compassion, as in creating a wonderful recipe that ultimately turns out great. I know I love cooking, and every time I find a new recipe, I'm very eager to try it. And sometimes I kind of do it great the first time, but most times than not, it takes me a couple of tries to really perfect it, to improve it, and to get all spices right together. So I'm putting it apart, I'm starting from the ingredients, putting them together and tasting it and see if I like the taste. And if I don't like the taste, that's all right, because I can make a second batch, or I can do it second time better. One of those projects, culinary projects that I started, is making pizza. You wouldn't believe how such a basic food, how much things one has to change in order to make a perfect Napolitan style pizza. I love the journey. And every time I made pizza so many times, and went through different ovens, went through different methods of creating the dough, bought different ingredients. And every time I make it, it's such an interesting part, because I can start from the ingredients, put things together, and I can still improve on things. It's a fascinating journey. I love it. So, and then I think from a perspective, okay, what could I do differently? Maybe a bit over the sauce, maybe the hydration of the dough, maybe buy different ingredients, maybe change the temperature of the oven. So in those sessions, that's exactly what we do. We kind of looking at ourselves in the mirror and trying to look with compassion, and all those things that we have, all our strengths and all our flaws, and see how we can make it better. In a sense that we can enjoy life more. Because I dare say that most of the time, it's not there's nothing wrong with us, but it's much wrong with the perception that we have of ourselves. So I maybe to reiterate what I just said, it's not about improving yourself, but started with improving the perception of the self. And you may find that actually most of the things that you do are just fine, but the perception is not there. Again, the inner critic that we started off with. So if you change the perception of yourself, then you start realizing that everything that you have done were actually a human experience. It's okay. It's okay to fail. It's okay to improve. It's okay to have those shortcomings. And that's what we do here. We're trying to figure it out. We do not assume that this is the end point. So growth mindset. Yes, viewing challenges and failures as opportunities for learning and growth. It's one of the factors of self-acceptance. Seeing setbacks as stepping stones towards personal development rather than reflection on your worth. I want to bring back. I am loved, I am worthy, I am enough. This applies regardless of the situation, whether we are succeeding or failing. This is true. This is something we fell back on. That's a growth mindset. You are failing and you're still worthy, loved, worthy, and enough. However, seeing the failure, now you can improve, you can learn, you can grow. It's an opportunity. It's not a bad thing. Okay. Self-acceptance is one of those topics that we could discuss. We could discuss every day, all day, because we are all short on self-acceptance. We are all short of self-compassion. So there's always something to look at. But right now, I want to invite you to meditate with me on it and see if you can apply any or some of those things that we spoke about in your meditation practice. Because meditation practice is a laboratory. It's a lab in which we can practice all those things and we can see clearer the inner critic that will come in the form of thoughts or emotions. And we see if we can apply a bit of more accepting practice, self-compassion, apply that self-acceptance that we spoke about. It does not always happen through talking. Most of the time it happens through practice. And all of the topics are topics that can be applied in real life. As a scientist, I like applied sciences. Talking, it's a one part. But the far more important part is the practice. So let us practice now. And I switch to the meditation mode where you can see the ocean and you can see the waves on the surface of the ocean. Ocean being a metaphor for life. Doesn't matter how big the waves on the surface, underneath, in the depth, we are always loved, we are always worthy, we are always enough. So let's look at this image from that perspective. And begin this meditation by recognizing right here, right now, before we close your eyes, that this is the guy. I start with the guy in the mirror. And I present myself right here, right now, the way I am. I put aside for a moment the wants and needs and start here the way I am. Then close your eyes and check in with yourself, with your physical body. What there is under the surface that manifests as sensations, tightness, maybe discomfort, and allow those tensions to be released, be softened, knowing that regardless of the circumstances, you are loved, you are worthy, and you are enough. That doesn't mean there are no ways to learn and to grow. But it's much easier to learn and to grow when you accept the isness of things. You accept the things the way they are. And then amidst those sensations, thoughts, and emotions, you recognize the works of the inner critic. Maybe the position I assumed is not straight enough. Maybe my feet are not resting on the floor the way I wanted. So the inner critic is present there, but we simply not allow the inner critic to take the driver's seat. Let be the passenger in the back seat, quite frankly, and say, you're welcome to join, but you are not allowed to drive. You are in the driver's seat, knowing your strengths, knowing your talents, moving at your own pace, one breath at a time. How does it feel to accept yourself the way you are? I feel that I can drop my shoulders a bit. I am free to relax my jaw. I recognize the goodness in me. And recognize that right here, right now, I don't need to do anything. I don't need to be anyone in particular. Simply being present, being who I am, where I am right now is enough. One breath at a time. And you can see by checking in with your physical body that when you have this attitude, most of the tension in your body just melts. Just being released. And in that state, your body is naturally at ease. And if there is any tension or discomfort, you may look at it with compassion, with acceptance. Maybe, only maybe, this sensation that you feel right now try to tell you something. And the only way to find out is to stay with it. Continuous journey. Moving on one breath at a time. Without judgment. without comparing yourself to the norms or standards that are human made, standing tall the way you are. And now, to conclude this short meditation, simply take one deep cleansing breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Welcome back. So, how did it feel to apply self-acceptance in this meditation? In one word, please describe how you feel and put it in the comment section. I would love to know. When it comes to myself, it's always a pleasure and joy to meditate with you guys. It's an extra, it's a layer, or I take it to the next level. It's so much easier knowing that I'm not meditating by myself. The power of the collective. Thank you for your presence. Berkeley, great journey. Nola, courageous. Love that. Elizabeth, encouraging. Again, the courage is a theme. Anne, relieved. Liz, loved. Deb, calm. Sandy, accepting. They all beautiful descriptions. And thank you for sharing them. So thank you for your presence today. Thank you for your contribution. Next week, we take on board an interesting topic, and we will consider meditation as a practice of, as a meditation, as a practice that allows us, as a habituation to openness. Yeah, that's what I meant to say. Meditation as a habituation to openness. Something I've taken from Andrew Holacek and his work. A very interesting definition of meditation, and definitely helped me a lot with my practice. And I'll be curious to know whether this will resonate with you. But that's next week. And please, if you wish to stay notified, go to my profile inside Timer, follow me there, click the bell button. That will send you infrequent notifications about events like this one and upcoming guided meditations. So once again, thank you for your presence, Liz. Thank you so much for your kind donation. I look forward to chatting with you next week. And for now, have a restful night, a beautiful day, wherever you are. Until then.